Welcome everyone to the third day of DCASE. I'll leave it to Ana Maria to host this session. So yeah, all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Frederick. Hi, everyone. So I am Ana Maria Mesaros, and together with Roman Serizel, coordinating the DCASE challenge. And what that means practically is trying to keep the tasks in line, same schedule, same type of presentations, information, and so on. So we are practically the connection between the task organizers and the steering group, and then between the task organizers and the participants. So just allow me to share my screen. Yes, I hope that I'm sharing the correct one. So in the very first here, I want to just say a few words about the DCASE challenge. So we started with the aim to provide open data and encourage reproducible research, and so also to attract the new researchers in the field. It's somehow the challenge during the years became a very important channel for dissemination of course work, the research in this area, but also the new data sets and kind of the novel research questions on environmental sound scene analysis. And it's very nice to see that in the beginning, there were a lot of this kind of a very like audio classification type of problems. And now we have a bit more variety. So there was like a sort of localization, there is language through the captioning task, there is video, and also there are diverse settings for the task. So it's not anymore the textbook supervised classification. So there was like quick supervision, unsupervised learning, few shot learning. We are now kind of also expanding in a way the research field with this. In terms of participation, it was growing very nicely. So this year we are kind of on the last year's levels with the number of teams. There was not much decrease there, but the number of entries is lower. So I would only assume that maybe people are paying a bit more attention to their systems and that they are not necessarily submitting like for the maximum number allowed for each team. So they are maybe more selective with what they are submitting. Okay, this might come as a slight surprise that we will have a judges award. So unfortunately, we do not have any monetary prize for this, but we thought that perhaps it's a nice thing to select the most interesting papers, like reports and systems from each of the tasks. So we kind of combined now the judges award and the reproducible system, and then we put them into one. It's kind of the interesting work selected by the task organizers and some reviewers, and then if it was reproducible, then it got some extra points. So these awards, they will be announced in the last day together with the workshop best paper. So in the following, there will be a short presentation, just the highlights about each of the tasks. So we had 6 tasks this year, and you are probably familiar with them. There will be just shortly about each of them. And so I would like to ask I hope that all the organizers that have to present something about their task are here. And I would like to remind them to try to keep it to 8 minutes. So, well, okay, it's not such a big problem if we overshoot, but let's try to keep it in time. So I am also presenting the task 1 highlights. And so this year we had acoustic scene classification. So it's called acoustic, even though in the subtask B we also had visual information available. So we had 2 different subtasks. One of them was the low complexity acoustic scene classification with multiple devices. So this combined last year's low complexity with the kind of like a 10 class problem that we usually had in the last years. And in the subtask B, we had audiovisual scene classification, so that we provided audio and video for the training and test material. In the low complexity subtask, so we had 10 classes, we had 12 cities and 15 devices, but we mixed it up in a nice way, so that we had kept 2 cities for only evaluation. So these were unseen in the development data. And then from the 15 devices, we kept some of them, both real and simulated devices, only in the evaluation set. So then to kind of like verify how well the methods are generalizing over this kind of unseen data from multiple points of view. There was 64 hours of data, but mostly it was from one device, so that this also required some sort of dealing with the device mismatch and the training in this stage. This year, the restriction on the model size was 128, and this was 128 kilobytes, non-zero parameters. So in this one, we excluded the explicit feature extraction, but not the calculation of embeddings, because we consider them like a special type of feature, which then kind of like gets into the same network. The specific thing that we did with the baseline for this task was to quantize the network parameters after they were trained in order to get under the limit. In this one, we had 99 systems submitted from 30 teams. Like, this was a very good, very big success, I would say. Overall trends, like very shortly, just mail energies, the typical augmentation of audio, a lot of residual networks, weight quantization. So this was one main method used for the fitting under the limit of the size. And a lot of systems are very close to the size limit. But then there were also these kind of very small models which use like a 1-bit quantization, so like we did 16. So in a way, in this one, the methods were very clearly directed towards how to obtain the light models. So there was like knowledge distillation, the weights quantization, sparsity. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that we don't really have any questions in this side. So the questions are, of course, coming at the poster session, which comes after this presentation. In the audio-visual scene classification, this was the subtask B. We provided similarly the 10 classes from 12 cities with the same kind of split with the cities. And we had 34 hours of development data because we wanted to give the synchronized audio and video. I will not play these videos, but these are some of the typical kind of scenes that were recorded. So like there's a street and there's in a tram, and that one is I think it's a metro. Yeah, it looks like a shopping mall. Yes. So in this one, we had 43 systems from 13 teams. As general trends for what happened here is that a lot of them were joint audio and visual systems. So of course, I think that having the visual information is rather important, at least for humans. So then it kind of makes sense that also the participants were taking advantage of this. So 27 out of the 43 systems were using both modalities. So there was the augmentation available, like the typical ones on the audio side, and then also in the visual side, there was, for example, this color jitter. And the methods were dominated by use of this kind of large pre-trained models. So there were the audio ones, which were trained on audio set, and then there were the video ones, which were trained on like ImageNet or DisPlaySys 365. And if we consider the separate modalities, we noticed that the video-only systems had no problem in solving this problem. So they perform so much better than the audio-only systems. Very quickly, the summary of our task. So a few observations. This low complexity acoustic scene classification, this is rather timely topic for like realistic use. If we want to have this kind of thing in common devices, then there will be always requirement for low complexity, and there will always be mismatched devices. We had a slightly higher number of submissions in this one than in the previous year's low complexity task, even though this was a more difficult setup with the 10 classes instead of 3. But unfortunately, there was not much highly innovative methods. So one of the questions that I would want us to discuss, maybe in the poster session or in the Slack of this, in the Slack channel of this paper, like what can we bring new to this task? Or is there a better way to measure the complexity? So maybe you should keep this in mind to try to come and talk with us. Then for the audiovisual scene classification, this generated significant interest from the community, but it was not the most difficult audiovisual task. So the video-based methods, they are so good at it. So even though there is some improvement in the joint methods that is brought by the audio, I think that the fact that it was so dominated by pre-trained models, the question is now, how does this direction of work fit with the DCASE, and what can we do with it? So we had an excellent talk yesterday from Kristen about kind of audiovisual data, but then the question is, what do we want to do in DCASE about this? This was my part. Thank you very much. So now task 2, please share your screen. And
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay, so hello, I am Yohei Kawaguchi from Hitachi. I will talk about task 2, unsupervised anomalous sound detection for machine condition monitoring and domain shift conditions. The task organization is a collaboration with members from Doshi University, Google, NTT, and Hitachi. Anomalous sound detection is a task of identifying if a machine is normal or anomalous from sound. Automatic detection of mechanical failure is an essential technology for factory automation. Anomalous sound detection has 2 challenges. One is how to detect anomalies with no anomalous training data. Normal training sample can be collected easily, but anomalies are rare in actual cases, and it's impossible to collect all variations. So we can use only normal data in a training phase. The other challenge is how to avoid the effect of training test gaps. Seasonally or accidentally, the recorded sound can change between training and test data regardless of anomalies. So, for example, in this factory, the demand for cakes changes depending on the season. In this case, the production speed will change, and sound also will change from training and test. This training test gap is called the domain shift, and it's difficult to distinguish between domain shifts and anomalies. This figure shows the position of challenge tasks. The x-axis means fewer training samples of events to be detected, and y-axis means more significant domain shifts. In the upper left, there were some past tasks of few shot event detection, and these tasks will detect only defined sounds. The 2020 task 2 was in the upper right, and we targeted unsupervised anomalous sound detection. That is the detection of unknown sounds. Then this year's target is in the lower right, unsupervised anomalous sound detection under domain shift. Now, this year, we prepared 7 machine types: fan, gearbox, pump, slide rail, toy car, toy train, valve. Each machine type contains 6 sections. The section is almost a machine product and a unit for calculating performance metrics. Each section consists of 2 different conditions called source domain and target domain. The operating speed, machine load, and so on differ between 2 domains. We made the dataset from Toy-Almos 2 and Mini-Due. As a training data, 1,000 normal clips were available in the source domain, and only 3 normal clips were available in the target domain. Each clip is a 10-second monaural wave file. The other points are similar to 2020, but with some differences. For example, this year's offshore score is calculated by the harmonic mean of AUCs and PAUCs of all machine types. This is for evaluating the generalization performance. We prepared 2 baseline systems. One is a regular autoencoder, which calculates the reconstruction error as an anomaly score. This baseline assumes that reconstruction is difficult for anomalous sounds. The other baseline is an outlier exposure-based detector using section classification, which calculates the negative logic of section classification as an anomaly score. This baseline assumes that section classification is difficult for anomalous sound. As a result, we received 76 submissions from 27 teams. 20 teams achieved better performance for the than the baseline systems. This figure shows target domain AUCs up to the 10 place in the official ranking. The target domain AUC roughly correlates to official ranking. Here we have a question: what is a remarkable approach of the top rankers? The answer is that we found 2 remarkable approaches. The first is a parallel type hybrid approach. This approach is an ensemble of in-layer modeling based outlier detection and outlier exposure. Here, in-layer modeling means outlier detection method by modeling the normal condition. The parallel type approach uses multiple models in parallel, so it's likely to achieve high performance for generalization. But we can note that the model size tend to be large due to ensemble. There are some future works in this point. And the second approach is a serial type hybrid approach. First, this approach trains a feature extractor by using the section classification task, like outlier exposure method. Then the feature extractor extracts feature embedding and send it to the in-layer models for outlier detection. The serial type approach uses powerful feature extractions specific to the outlier exposure, and robustness of in-layer modeling overcomes the instability of the outlier exposure. The serial type approach, it can limit the model size. Also, we can perform domain adaptation by updating only the in-layer model with only a few target domain data. But we can know that section classification does not always provide good embeddings. There are some future works in this point. Okay, that's it. 7 related papers presented in the workshop. Let's enjoy the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yohei. So now task 3.
Hello.
Hayakis. Yes, please share your screen.
Let me, yeah. Okay, can you see the slides? Yeah, great. Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Arkontis. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in the audio research group of Tampere University. And this is some of the highlights and points we wanted to communicate about task 3, sound event localization and detection, organized by me, Sarat, Daniel, and Thomas from Tampere University, and Antoine and Prerak from INRIA Nancy. So sound event localization and detection is a task that essentially we are aiming to combine two other classical tasks now. One, sound event detection, where we try to detect the presence and activations of sound events over time from predefined target classes, and also the more classical sound source localization task, where we try to detect the presence of strongly localized sound events and find their direction of arrival or position without regards to their source type. So by combining these two, we are kind of aiming in a more holistic view of the sound scene around us. The task was introduced first time in 2019, and now we are on its third iteration. So regarding the dataset for this year, it was in a way generated in a similar manner as the dataset from last year's challenge. We emulated 600 minutes of spatial sound recordings with spatialized sound events for development, and another 200 minutes for evaluation, delivered in two spatial sound formats. One was a 4-channel tetrahedral microphone array, and the other was a 4-channel first-order ambisonics format. The events were spatialized with real room responses collected in 13 different rooms, and along about 200 spatial measurement trajectories, with the source to receiver distance varying between 1 to 5 meters. And additionally, we were also capturing spatial ambient noise recorded with the same microphone setups in these environments, in these rooms that we captured the responses. And that spatial ambient noise was added to the spatialized mixtures of events that we were creating at a varying levels of signal to noise ratio. We also had both static and moving sources emulating the recordings. The main difference of this year's dataset was the inclusion of a condition that we didn't have in the previous one, and we were seeing as necessary to get the dataset and the task to closer to realistic conditions, and that was the inclusion of interfering sound events, that they were localized, but they did not belong to the target classes. So that's why we were calling these events as directional interferers, and we were expecting their presence to have a significant effect to the performance of systems, to the performance of a system trained for the task. Of course, that's a condition that is very common in practice, and we wanted to promote systems that they could be robust to that. Also, we increased the amount of maximum overlapping target events from 2 to 3 in this year's dataset. We had one additional layer of interfering events, and we also increased the presence of instances that we had events from the same class overlapping in time, which is a condition that can be resolved in this sound event localization and detection task using spatial information, and it's something that again we want to promote. So for example, last year there was a presence of these frames in the dataset. It was about 3% or 2.5%. This year was like more than 10%. We assumed that the presence of interfering events would have a significant effect. We did some experiments with different versions of the dataset on our baseline. You can find more detailed results on an accompanying paper. But from there, we could see, for example, that the presence of reverberation, going from anechoic emulations of the sound scenes to the versions of the sound scenes with reverberation that they are in the challenge, we can see that it affects all these scores by this performance shift that we see here in a detection, spatial detection score, and also localization error score. However, that shift is less, for example, than what we can see, with the shift of introducing just a single layer of an interfering sound event on top of the target sound events. So that was the main motivation, in a way, of this year's challenge. In terms of submissions, we had 12 participating teams with 31 submissions, 14 academic affiliations, and 3 industry affiliations. Most systems this year used a specific representation of this sound event localization and detection target, which was this activity-coupled direction of arrival representation introduced from one of the best teams last year. And it's a very simple and smart modification that essentially, instead of using a separate combination of separate losses for detection and localization, it joins these two into a vector representation combining both the direction of arrival and class activation, and reduces this combination of losses to one kind of homogeneous regression loss. So very simple and smart, and most teams used it for that reason. And it was also integrated in this year's baseline. Another big difference was the presence of self-attention this year. Last year, I think there was only 2 systems using self-attention. This year, like 10 out of 12 systems had some form of self-attention, as transformer, conformer blocks, or some cross-modal attention blocks. Data augmentation was used by most systems, also in the challenge. One new thing was that this time there were no systems that they were using some kind of model-based localization, meaning localization module that it was not relying on training. And also there were no any more attempts on systems modeling separately sound event detection and separately localization, and then being fused in the end. This year, all the systems were trying to do much more jointly the modeling of the task. So in terms of results, the winning team by Simada and collaborators and the colleagues from Sony had an impressive performance, over 80% improvement compared to the baseline. Generally, 10 out of 12 systems had the better performance than the baseline. One thing that it was a little bit of a letdown was the fact that only 3 systems were trying to tackle this case of same class in the same class instances happening. And I think the main reason for that is that this Actua representation that it was employed by most systems, at least in this form, as it was used, it allows 1 event per class. So most people went for that. And also, due to ensembling, detecting 1 event per class was making much simpler combining estimates from different models in an ensemble. Otherwise, you will have troubles with problems with ambiguity, which is an interesting case to be examined further. Also, 4 out of 12 systems were open and they were providing code, including the second best system from Nguyen, from NTU in Singapore, which is a very, very strong system. And I think that's all. Thank you for listening and or participating if you did.
Thanks, Akis. Next is task 4, Roman.
Okay, hi. Let me share my screen now. Can you see my screen now? Anyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. So I'm going to talk about the task 4 from this year. So task 4 has now been running for 4 years, and for the past 2 years, it has been like sound event detection and separation in domestic environments. So we were quite a few people organizing the task this year, so including myself, Francesca Ronchini, and Nicolas Turpot, who are at INRIA in Nancy, John Hershey, Scott Wisdom, Hakan Erdogan, and Dan Ellis, who are at Google in New York, Justin Salomon at Adobe, Eduardo Fonseca at MTG, and Prem Sijaraman, sorry for that, at Descript. So just reminding the setup wasn't been changing like a lot in the past years, what's been like evolving gradually. We still want to do sound event detection, meaning that we have an audio recording and we want to get the sound event classes and the time boundaries. And at training time, we have a small set of labeled data and recorded data that are going to be in domain with the output test data. And those are weakly labeled because it's cheap and reliable to annotate. And we got a larger set of unlabeled data also in domain data. So since last year, we are also allowing out, there could be overlapping sound events. We're allowing using and encouraging using sound separation front-end in order to try to separate the audio streams and to detect like overlapping classes separately. For the past 3 years, we have also been allowing and encouraging to use synthetic soundscape. So synthetic soundscape is an easy and cheap way to get strongly labeled data. So we have isolated foreground event on one side and background sound on the other side, and we are combining everything here with Caper in order to synthesize soundscape. And so this way we can synthesize a lot of soundscape and have cheap annotation on these soundscapes. So what is new since last year is that this year we provide also non-target isolated events. So until this year, it was only target event and then the background as interference. This year, we provide non-target isolated events and probability distribution that were computed on the subset of audio set that was strongly annotated. And if you want to know more about the impact of this non-target isolated event, you can go and discuss with Francesca in session C about paper 41 that is mainly related to the challenge baseline. One additional change here is that we changed the metric. So we switched from an event-based F1 score that was the official metric until last year to the polyphonic sound event detection score that was a contrastive metric last year. And this year we use this as an official metric. And one thing that we've been introducing in order to try to avoid having a system that just try to overfit one specific metric is that we introduced 2 different setups of the metric that could be 2 different operating modes. So the PSDS one is really strict about segmentation. And so if you don't have the good segmentation, then your events are not going to be considered as true positive. And the PSDS2 is going to be more relaxed about segmentation. And so the ranking score is the combination of these 2 scores. And one thing we did in order to encourage participants to propose solutions that are targeting one solution or the other, is that we were taking the best score on different systems. So if one system is good at really strict segmentation and the other one is good at really relaxed segmentation, so something that is close to audio tagging, then we could combine the score for the two different systems. And so this year, for the past year, we have a relatively stable amount of people participating. So we have 22 teams and 78 submissions. So roughly all of the teams are submitting 4 systems. And this year we had not so many participating teams regarding this combination of sound separation and sound event detection. We had only 1 team and 3 submissions. So this was a bit of a disappointment. And I'm not going to present any number here. If you're eager to discuss number and things like that, then you can join on the poster. I'm just going to present a few takeaways here. So we have roughly almost 2/3 of the system that did beat the baseline, which means that we had quite some improvement, but the baseline is not so bad either. And only 26 systems who did beat the sound separation and sound event detection baseline. And if we look at team-based performance, then we have 16 teams over 22 teams that did beat the baseline, and only 9 teams that did beat the sound separation and sound event detection baseline. Now there were few disappointments on this year. We had really very few sound separation submission, which was a disappointment for us because we are interested in understanding how those two blocks could cooperate. And we didn't have so much feedback from the participants about them trying to synthesize new soundscape and finding new way to put constraint on the soundscape in order to make them more realistic and closer to the test domain. One thing that is not a good or a bad thing is that segmentation remains a problem. We still have a huge gap between the strict PSDS, so the PSDS1 that is strict on segmentation, and the PSDS2 that has a more loose constraint on segmentation. So there is still a segmentation problem here if we want something that's really fine. And on the good aspect is that we had some participants who did propose some specific solution for the different PSDS scenarios. So not only just different fine tuning, but did use some different approach depending on if you want to have really focused event detection, or if you can afford having the event loosely detected. And one of the things that we were quite happy about, so we're not quite close to task 1 in terms of complexity, but from the last year to this year, we didn't see a large complexity increase, and we have a rather stable complexity overall, and many systems that did not increase the complexity so much compared to the baseline. So this is a nice thing, as during the first years, we had this really growing complexity for the systems. And this is all from my side. And if you want to know a bit more, well, please come and discuss with us during the poster session.
Thank you. So next one is task 5. Hey, Dan.
Hello. So my name is Dan. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce a new task to DCASE this year. So we're presenting the few-shot bioacoustic event detection task. So there's a large group of collaborators. Veronica Morphy at Queen Mary was the lead coordinator of everything. But there's a large group of coordinators, and you'll find out why in a second. So the task. The task is few-shot, essentially sound event detection, SED, as we've been talking about. We aren't the inventors of the concept of few-shot learning. You may have heard of it, but something that's quite different here from most of the previous work on few-shot learning is this connection to sound event detection. So this really, really strongly emerges from the kind of use case that we find in bioacoustics and biodiversity monitoring, that researchers will have very long sound recordings and they can label the first few sounds, and then they want a system to label the rest of the sounds. So the category, the class in question can change from researcher to researcher, and the system should be able to just pick up on the first few and catch the rest. You may have seen some work on few-shot learning in prior work, but mostly it's about classification, not SED. So the data sets that we assembled for this task, we wanted to assemble, because this is, or at least it can be addressed as a kind of meta-learning type task. So people are supposed to submit systems which can then be deployed on many different few-shot tasks. So if you look at the evaluation set here, we've actually got 3 different data sets representing 3 different tasks, ME, ML, DC. So that's meerkats, mammals and birds, and dawn chorus, which is birds in the morning. So these are 3 separate evaluation data sets. For each of those 3 evaluation data sets, we have this few shots labeled, and we want to detect the rest. So the same is true for the training set and for the validation set as well. So those, of course, are provided to participants. So we have in total 9 different data sets here, 9 data sets representing some sort of bioacoustic SED task, a sort of one class sound event detection task. And the data sets are very different. In some cases, they're handheld recorders. Some cases, they're recorders on the animal themselves. So there are a lot of differences. And there's an inherent issue of generality or domain adaptation in being able to adapt to these different scenarios. This requires a big organizing team. I won't go through all the names here, but a fantastic team of people who contributed their own data from their own projects and also helped to design the task. The baseline methods that we provided 2 very different methods. First was template matching. This is a very simple idea that's been used extensively in bioacoustics. So you take a spectrogram and you have a kind of template, a sort of patch that you're looking for, and you simply find a sort of peak cross correlation to match against the occurrence of that template. So this will work for some sounds and it will work badly for other sounds, but it's a very good baseline because it's commonly used. The second is a deep learning method based on prototypical networks. So this, again, is based on existing few-shot learning research, but adapted to SED. The results, we had 9 different teams submitting, so all very interesting. A lot of this work is based on prototypical networks, but there is a tweak to that, as you'll certainly see in the posters. Firstly, I should highlight here, we've got the score on the evaluation set, and then we've got the score on the validation set here as well. And then finally, we've got the 3 different columns, the 3 different data sets in the evaluation set. There's a lot of variability. So this is a new task. It was quite a difficult task. And so you can see the highest evaluation score here is 38% on the F measure. This is partly due to this DC dawn chorus data set actually being quite hard for all systems that were submitted. So the low scores on DC contributed to the general low scores, and this is what we see across the piece. But it also means that the scores are quite different from the evaluation set and the validation set. So there are some differences here. One thing I should point out is that the dawn chorus dataset is more difficult. It's more dense sound scenes, and that was expected. So part of the design here is we have some data sets with dense sound and some data sets with sparse sound. So the submissions. All the submissions use prototypical networks. This actually top scoring submission from Zhu et al. Did use transductive inference as well, which is an interesting tweak because it applies some test time modification to the network. So I would recommend you have a look at that paper. Data augmentation was applied by most teams, of course, and it was popular to use PCEN, this per channel energy normalization, as a way of pre-processing the spectrograms and standardizing it, emphasizing the events. All systems rely on some sort of post-processing. That's pretty standard for a lot of sound event detection. And all the systems are, as we saw on the previous slide, quite dataset sensitive. The general drop in performance on Dawn Chorus and good performance on these sort of sparser mammal vocalization sounds. And this is something which is we would like to evaluate over a broader set of sound files. I think this clearly shows that this is not yet a solved problem. So we've got some really encouraging results, and I think it deserves more research. So that's pretty much the main conclusion. So I think we're at the state of the art where there is easily more work to be done on this and related tasks, which of course means that we're intending to do it again in future. So the difference that you saw between the data sets, it would be good to have more and diverse data sets. We are specifically looking at bioacoustics here, so we're specifically looking at animal sound data sets, and we do have added collaborators that we're going to propose next year. If anyone's interested, then please get in touch, especially if you have unusual SED data sets with animal sounds. So with that, I want to thank you. I want to remind you that this was a very big collaboration with a lot of lovely people involved. And do check out the challenge poster, but also the posters from the individual papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. And now the last presentation about the task 6. We see the slides somewhere, but we are not hearing you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Yes. Good.
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Samuel Lipping, and from Tampere University, and I'm going to present the overview of the automated audio captioning task of DCASE. This is the second year this has been organized, and the setup is pretty much the same. So, task is audio captioning, meaning that you're supposed to generate a natural language description for a given audio sample. The dataset is pretty much the same as last year, so a well-curated crowdsourced dataset, except that we have 2,000 sounds more than last year with the corresponding captions and metadata. Also, unlike last year, now we allow the use of external data. Participation this year was more than last year, so that's a nice thing. This year we had 12 teams, 37 systems, 20 institutes, and 52 authors, all of which are more than last year. And here are the results of this year's task. On the x-axis, you have the amount of parameters, and on the y, you have the evaluated metric, which is the spider score. We can see that there are a wide variety of complexities that achieved a good score. We have highlighted the two highest scoring teams, which are quite close together. The difference between those teams is 1.4 spider score, and the difference between the two highest scoring submissions, which were from the same team, was 0.8 spider score. And all of the submissions beat the baseline. And from our received metadata and reports, we could gather some trends. All of them use an encoder-decoder structure, where the encoder was mostly CNNs and decoders were mostly transformers and RNNs. There were, however, some submissions that used, instead of a CNN encoder, they used an MLP mixer, transformers, or RNNs. And you can see in the figure the highlighted squares correspond to the highlighted text. And in terms of learning setup, all of the systems use this typical supervised learning setup, while 3 teams also supplemented that with reinforcement learning. And in terms of external data, most systems used transfer learning. The most common data set for this was audio set in the form of the pre-trained audio networks, followed by the use of audio caps. And one team also used some web crawl data where they crawl the web for audio samples and descriptions. Most approaches also use data augmentation, with two teams using more than one type of augmentation, and the most common augmentation type was spec augment. Audio features were exclusively mel spectrograms, and word embeddings were either learned or pre-trained, and some used also one-hot word encoding. In terms of reproducibility, 4 teams have offered open source code so far for their approaches on GitHub, and one of those teams also provided pre-trained weights. We had a few teams who mentioned in their report that they would publish this information after the challenge, but we can only go based on what's available right now. And that's it. If you want to stay up to date with audio captioning research, we have a repository with audio captioning papers. Thank you.
So hi again. I just have a few words to close this session. I'm going to share my screen again. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So just a few remarks regarding the challenge for this year here. What's coming next during the workshop? So in a few minutes, there will be the poster sessions. I think Frederick will announce the poster session, and you can find us on GatherTown. And if you want to know more about the tasks, please come and discuss with us during the poster session. On Friday, during the workshop closing session, there would be the challenge award announcement. So, well, please attend here if you want to discover what's new and exciting the challenge brought us this year. And just a reminder also that there is a call for task proposal that is open. The deadline is on November 22nd. So, no, it's a pretty short amount of time. But if you have something already ready or close to be ready, don't hesitate. We are always waiting for new interesting tasks. Just so you know a bit about the timeline, the challenge opening is scheduled for mid-March in 2022. And you have more information on the DCASE website if you go on the news part, and you'll see the task for the call for proposal. If you're interested, if you have questions, if you don't know how is it to organize a task and so on, you can contact us, so Anna Maria and me, either by email, or we'll be also walking around in GatherTown, so you can come and discuss with us. And that's all I had to say for the closing part. And we'll see you in a few minutes in the poster session. Thanks. Bye.